Richard Smith was buttoning up the last few buttons on a freshly ironed shirt. His wife, Mary Ann, was looking for suitable jewelry for her evening dress. She looked gorgeous. An elegant black dress hugged her slender figure, and her blonde hair, arranged in curls, gave her the genuine charm that had attracted the eyes of others since their youth. But this evening her behavior seemed strange to Richard, and a slight shadow of anxiety clouded his thoughts. "Are you ready, honey?" she asked, glancing at him through the mirror. Her smile was flawless. Richard just nodded, trying not to show that doubts were already gnawing at him from the inside. They arrived at her company's party a little later than planned. The hum of voices and the soft light of large chandeliers filled the hall with an atmosphere of luxury and celebration. Mary Ann walked confidently beside him, her heels tapping softly on the marble floor, but Richard felt like an outsider. He had never enjoyed these events, but today he insisted on his presence, as if something important made him wary. When they entered the hall, Richard noticed a man in his 50s walking confidently towards them. The stranger was heading straight for Mary Ann with the air of a man who already knows what's waiting for him. Richard slowed his pace, but Mary Ann seemed to notice his reaction immediately. She took a step to the side, holding out her hand in a light gesture, as if trying to stop him, and quickly turned to Richard. Her smile was bright and forced. "What kind of person is this?" thought Richard. He wanted to ask his wife a question, but he preferred to watch. Richard knew what women who were hiding something looked like. He was always proud of his ability to read people, although he never expected to use this skill on his wife. Richard cast a quick glance in the direction of the man who was standing at the bar, sipping whiskey. His gaze was directed directly at them, and although he pretended to be just bored, Richard felt an invisible current of tension run between them. "An interesting man, your colleague. Do we know each other?" Richard asked dryly, looking at the man at the bar. Mary Ann froze slightly but immediately raised her glass, taking a small sip as if trying to gain time. Her response was calm, but her tone still betrayed tension. "Oh, it's David Johnson. We work together. He is one of our top employees in the sales department." "He's a very talented guy," she shrugged as if it was nothing special. "Just a colleague?" Richard nodded silently, but a picture was already forming in his mind. Just a colleague does not force a woman to cast such glances, does not cause her the hidden fear that he noticed in her eyes when he asked a question. This was no ordinary person in her life. He wanted to continue the conversation, but Mary Ann abruptly stood up, glancing over her shoulder. "I need to go to the ladies' room," she said, not looking at him. "Wait for me here." She hurriedly disappeared into the crowd and Richard was left alone at the table. His eyes immediately darted to David. The man, noticing Mary Ann's departure, put the glass on the counter and headed to the opposite side of the room. Richard decided that he couldn't stay still any longer. He got up, trying to move so as not to attract attention, and headed towards the ladies' room, but after walking a few steps, he abruptly turned behind a pillar, hiding in the shadows. There he stopped and listened. At first, nothing happened. Only the noise of fun and the muffled voices of the guests. But a couple of minutes later, a muffled whisper came from the hallway outside the ladies' room. Richard recognized Mary Ann's voice. "David, what are you doing? We can't stay here." Her voice was nervous, almost pleading. "No one will notice," a man's voice replied. It was David's voice. Richard felt his heart tighten. He forced himself to remain motionless, continuing to listen. Everything inside him screamed, "Go in there, stop them." But he wanted to know more. He wanted to see everything with his own eyes so that he would have no doubts. "Please just give me some time," Mary Ann said. Her voice was trembling, but she tried to speak firmly. "We can't do this. He's here." "You always say that," David snorted. "But you still find time for me. Or do you think he'll never guess?" Richard felt the blood rush to his face. He took a step forward, but immediately stopped when he heard Mary Ann continue to speak. "He doesn't know anything. And I want it to stay that way." Her voice was almost a whisper, but every word sounded like thunder to Richard. "You need to be careful." Richard could barely contain himself. His hands clenched into fists and he felt his nails digging into his palms. At that moment, he realized that tonight would not be a peaceful night. He needed to do something, but first he wanted to see how far they were willing to go. The steps. They began to approach. Richard took a few steps back, hiding at the back of the hallway. He saw Mary Ann and David coming out of the shadows. She looked tense, her gaze darting nervously around, but he, on the contrary, was calm and relaxed, as if nothing could disturb his confidence. When they returned to the hall, Richard felt his mind fill with a mixture of rage and cold calculation. He wasn't going to make a scene. Not yet. But inside him, a plan was already forming that would turn their lives upside down. As they drove home, the tension between Richard and Mary Ann hung in the air like a thundercloud. The road passed in complete silence. Only the steady rumble of the engine and the sound of rain filled the void. Richard kept his hands on the steering wheel, his fingers tightening with each turn. When the car stopped in front of the house, Mary Ann quickly got out without waiting for him to open the door. Richard paused for a moment before following her. He saw her hurriedly open the door and disappear into the warm light of the hallway. After entering the house, he closed the door behind him and slowly took off his wet raincoat. Mary Ann was already in the kitchen, pretending to look for something in the fridge. Her movements were nervous and chaotic. "Are you going to eat something?" "What is it?" she asked, not looking at him. Her voice was even but too calm to be natural. "No," Richard said shortly without moving. He stood at the door, watching her like a predator sizing up its prey. Her shoulders were tense, and she avoided meeting his gaze as if she knew he understood something but didn't want to hear it. "It's a difficult evening, isn't it?" she added, trying to lighten the mood. Richard didn't answer. He took a few steps forward, stopping in the kitchen doorway. "Is there something you want to tell me?" "What is it?" he finally asked. His voice was low but cold, like an icy wind. Mary Ann froze, her hand still holding the refrigerator door. She slowly closed it and turned to face him. "What are you talking about?" "What is it?" she asked with a cautious smile, as if she was trying to pretend she didn't understand what he was talking about. Richard crossed his arms over his chest and looked her straight in the eye. "About what I saw tonight," he replied. His voice remained steady, but there was an undercurrent of menace in it. Mary Ann looked away, her face pale. She walked over to the table and put her hands on it as if looking for support. "I don't know what you're talking about, Richard," she said, but her voice faltered. Richard stepped closer, his presence filling the entire room. "You understand?" he said firmly. "I'm not blind, Mary Ann. I saw the way you looked at him. How you were whispering in the hallway. And I don't need your excuses." She sighed, trying to compose herself. "You've got it all wrong," she began. "It's simple, work. David and I are colleagues. We don't have anything." "Colleagues?" he repeated with a bitter smile. "Then why couldn't you even look me in the eye all evening? Why did your face turn white when I approached you in the hall?" Mary Ann lowered her head, her hair hiding her face. She knew it was useless to argue with Richard, but she continued to cling to the lie. "I'm just tired," she said softly. "Today was a difficult day and I didn't want any scenes." Richard frowned, his eyes flashing with anger. "A difficult day?" His voice rose but remained dangerously calm. "Are you saying that you're tired of me being there?" He looked at you as if you had been together for a long time. Mary Ann froze, her breathing became rapid. "You're wrong, Richard," she said, her voice shaking. "There's nothing between us." "Then tell me what he whispered to you in the hallway," he said, taking a step forward. "Tell me why you apologized to him." She was silent. The silence in the room became deafening. "I'm giving you one chance, Mary Ann," he said coldly. "Tell me the truth." "No." Her shoulders slumped. She knew she couldn't deny the obvious anymore and decided to walk away from the conversation. "I'm very tired of your silly suspicions," she finally whispered. "I'm going to bed." Richard felt his hands clench into fists. He took a deep breath, trying to keep his composure. "We'll talk tomorrow," he called over his shoulder as Mary Ann walked into the bedroom. The next day, Richard dialed the number he had kept in his notebook for a long time. "Private Detective Services," the card read. It was given to him by a colleague a few years ago, when the marital problems of one of the employees were discussed. It seemed superfluous to Richard at the time, almost a joke, but now it's the only way to find out the truth. "Good morning, Mr. Smith," said a low, confident voice. "I'm Peter Grayson. How can I help you?" Richard summarized the situation, carefully avoiding details that might betray his emotional state. He kept his voice calm even though everything was boiling inside. They agreed to meet at the detective's office the next day. At the meeting, Peter looked like Richard expected, an inconspicuous but attentive middle-aged man with a small briefcase and tired but focused eyes. "Mr. Smith, I understand that you want to keep this matter confidential," he began, arranging the papers on the table. "You don't have to worry. I work carefully and quickly." Richard gave the detective everything he knew, Mary Ann's daily routine, her work address, the make of her car, and even a list of her closest colleagues, including David Johnson. "How long will it take you?" "What is it?" he asked, trying not to show his impatience. "These cases usually take a couple of weeks, But based on your description, I can get results faster, Peter replied with confidence. If you're ready, I'll start right away. The first days dragged on for an excruciatingly long time. Richard continued to go to work, but every time his phone vibrated on his desk, he jumped, hoping it was Grayson. 3 days later, the detective called. I have something, he said shortly. Let's meet tomorrow morning at my office. Richard didn't sleep much that night. He spent hours running through possible scenarios in his head, from Mary Ann's complete acquittal to the worst-case scenarios. When he finally sat down at the desk in the detective's office, his hands were shaking slightly, but his face remained calm. Grayson placed a thin folder in front of him. This is everything I've been able to collect in recent days, he said. Do you have any questions before you watch this? Richard shook his head and opened the folder. The first photo immediately made his blood run cold. Mary Ann was standing at the entrance of a small hotel, hugging David, and their faces were so close that there was no doubt. The next photo showed them walking inside, his hand gently touching her hips. It got even worse. Richard looked at these photos and couldn't believe his eyes. That's all, Grayson said dryly, pushing the folder closer. I can collect more if you need. Or do you want audio? No, Richard said, his voice firm but cold. That's enough. He took the folder and went home. On the way, he did not turn on the music in the car, did not answer the phone. He needed to figure out how to conduct the upcoming conversation. When he entered the house, Mary Ann was cooking dinner in the kitchen. The aroma of her favorite chicken stew wafted through the room, but to Richard it seemed unpleasant. Hello, dear, she said, smiling. How was your day? He didn't answer. Instead, he carefully placed the folder on the table in the living room. We need to talk, he said. There was no anger or pain in his voice. Only the cold. Mary Ann frowned, her gaze dropping to the folder. What is it? What is it? She asked. Richard sat down across from her, his face unreadable. Open it, take a look. Her fingers trembled as she opened the folder. The first photo caught her off guard. Her face turned pale and her breathing became erratic. Richard. It's not what you think. Then explain to me what it is. His voice remained flat, almost indifferent. Make sure that I understand everything correctly. Mary Ann closed her eyes and sighed. It doesn't mean anything, she said, trying to maintain control. It's simple. It was a moment of weakness. He means nothing to me. Richard was silent, his gaze fixed on her. It doesn't mean anything? But it means a lot to me, he said. Apparently this moment of weakness lasted more than a year. Her eyes filled with tears. She was desperately trying to find the words. This? Not what you think, she muttered. It doesn't affect us. I still love you. You're the most important thing to me. Richard slowly leaned back, crossing his arms over his chest. Do you think that everything can be explained? What is it? He asked coldly. You lied to me every day. Do you think that's enough for me to just forget? Please, Richard. Her voice was shaking. You're not even trying to understand me, Richard. Stop it, she shouted. You're just judging me without even asking a single question. Aren't you wondering why this happened? Richard, who had been icily calm until now, turned to her abruptly, his voice like steel. What? Good. Come on, explain it. Why would you betray a man you've spent 20 years of your life with? What did I do that you decided to go to bed with this? David? It's not because of you. Stop it, she cried, her eyes glistening with tears. You don't even notice how we've grown apart over the years. You're all about your work, your plans, and I stayed in the background. In the background? Richard stepped closer, his face now just inches from hers. Mary Ann, I work 12 hours a day so that we can live in this house, drive nice cars, and pay for our daughter's college. And all this, it turns out, means that you felt lonely? Yes, she shouted, choking on her emotions. I needed more than just a house or money, Richard. I needed attention, I needed the feeling that I was important. And you? He stopped showing it to me a long time ago. Richard took a step back, his hands shaking, but he couldn't tell if it was from rage or pain. So that's your excuse? He said sarcastically, his voice filled with disdain. I worked so that we could have a life, and you decided that the best way to regain attention would be to have an affair with some office boyfriend? Mary Ann sighed, her shoulders sagging as if she was already tired of fighting. It's not an affair, Richard. Her voice was quieter but no less sharp. It's simple consolation. You don't understand what it's like to feel invisible in your own marriage. Consolation? He repeated with a bitter smile. Is that what you call comfort? Did you look into my eyes every night when I came home and at the same time went to him? How could you? Her voice got louder, almost a scream. Because you've never asked me how I feel. You've never noticed how much I suffer. You thought that your job and money would replace everything. And I needed something more. At least he listened to me. Richard stepped forward again, his gaze filled with anger. Was he listening? Are you serious? Do you think he cares about you? He shook his head. He's just another man who found it easy to take advantage of your weakness. And you let him do it. And what, Richard? Stop it, she shouted. Are you saying that you've never thought about leaving? Have you ever thought that I'm not good enough? Do you think I haven't noticed how you've been getting colder every year? Colder? He couldn't help but laugh ironically. I'm not the one who got cold, Marianne. You're the one who's become a stranger. You were physically there, but you haven't been with me for a long time. And you know what? I tried, damn it, I tried. And you? You didn't even tell me that you felt that way. You just went to him. She fell silent, clenching her hands into fists. Tears were streaming down her cheeks, but she didn't try to wipe them away. Because I knew you wouldn't understand, she said finally, her voice trembling. You've always been like this. Right, so sure that you're doing everything right. But sometimes the right thing isn't enough, Richard. Sometimes you need more. Richard stood motionless, his chest heaving up and down with emotions he could no longer control. More? He said it slowly. Do you want to know what I need? I needed my wife not to betray me, so that she could at least try to save what we've built. But instead you chose the easy way. You chose betrayal and betrayal. It's not an easy path, Richard. She screamed, her voice filled with pain. Do you think it was easy? Every time I came home I felt guilty. But I couldn't stop because it was the only thing that gave me the feeling that I was still alive. Those words were the last straw. Richard clenched his fists, his face contorted with rage. Are you alive? He whispered with icy calmness. Then be prepared for the fact that you will have to live without me from now on. He abruptly turned around and left the room, leaving her standing in the middle of the living room, crying and broken. Richard stood in the bedroom doorway, his face a mixture of exhaustion and determination. He didn't speak for a long time, as if he was searching for words that could express everything that had accumulated over the past weeks. Marianne was sitting on the bed, her eyes swollen from crying. She was silent, but her gaze was wary, as if she knew that something inevitable was about to happen. You have to go, Richard finally said. His voice was low and emotionless, as if he had already made up his mind. Marianne raised her head, her lips trembling. Leave? Where am I going, Richard? This is my house too. You can't just throw me out. He raised his hand to stop her. It was our home. But he's not ours anymore, Marianne. You've made your choice and I can't live under the same roof with you anymore. Her voice rang with fury. Are you just giving up on 20 years of marriage? For what? To prove his case? Richard, we can fix this if you give me a chance. Fix it? His eyes flashed. You betrayed me. You betrayed our promises, our family. It can't just be fixed. I want you to leave. Today. She jumped up, her hands shaking. Do you think you can throw me away so easily? Stop it, she shouted. I'm not leaving. You can get angry, scream, but I'm not leaving. Richard remained unperturbed. He gestured at the door. Your things are already packed. They're in your car. You can go anywhere. But you won't be in this house anymore. Marianne froze, her face contorted in shock. Did you really do that? She whispered, her voice filled with pain. Have you decided everything for me yet? You decided that, he replied softly. The moment you chose him and betrayed me. She fell back on the bed, clutched her head and started crying. But Richard couldn't afford to feel sorry anymore. He turned away and left the room. Marianne left a few hours later. Richard stood at the living room window and watched her car slowly pull out of the entrance. For a moment he felt empty, but he immediately suppressed the feeling. She had made her choice, and now it was time for him to make his own. He had barely closed the door when his phone rang. It was their daughter Jessica. Hi, Dad, she said, her voice strained. Mom just called me. What happened? Richard sighed. He knew this conversation was going to be difficult. I kicked her out, Jessica. She can't stay in this house anymore. What are you doing? Her scream was so loud that he involuntarily pulled the phone away from his ear. Did you kick my mom out of the house? How could you? Jessica, it's not your mother, it's her actions, he replied calmly. She betrayed me, us. I'm not going to live with that. Betrayed you? She sounded indignant. Dad, this is the 21st century. These things happen. That doesn't mean you have to destroy everything. You could try to understand her. Richard felt a surge of rage inside him. Are you out of your mind? How can I understand this? His voice was low but menacing. Do you want me to understand that my wife has been cheating on me for over a year? That she lied to me every day? How can you defend it? I'm not defending her, Jessica said, sounding calmer now but still determined. I just think you're making things worse than they are. Do you think that this is how you solve the problem? You're just destroying our family. Richard gripped the phone so tightly that his fingers turned white. Now I'm just trying to save what's left. What about me? Her voice cracked. Have you thought about how this will affect me? You didn't even ask for my opinion. It's none of your business, Jessica, he said sharply. This is between your mother and me. No, it's about me, she blurted out. And you know what? If you're so principled, maybe you shouldn't come to my wedding. His heart skipped a beat. What did you say? You heard? Her voice was firm now. If you can't forgive Mom, then why do I need you at the wedding? I want everything to be normal. You know what else? I want David to be there too. Richard felt something snap in his chest. David? You want this one? Was the man at your wedding? Yes, she replied coldly. He's a part of Mom's life. And if you can't accept that, then maybe you shouldn't be there at all. Are you serious? His voice was shaking with rage. Do you want this man who destroyed our family to be at your wedding, but I wasn't there? Her voice was cold now. Because I support Mom. She's my family too. Then let him walk you down the aisle. Richard hung up without waiting for an answer. He sat down on the sofa with his head in his hands. The family he had been building for so many years was crumbling before his eyes. Richard was sitting in his office, illuminated only by the soft glow of a desk lamp. On the table in front of him was a list of bank accounts, mortgage documents, and financial records. He could feel the determination pulsing inside him. If Mary Ann decided to destroy their family, he would make the consequences of her choice unbearable for her. He opened his laptop and went to the website of his offshore bank. A few years ago, he opened an account there for investment purposes, considering it part of strategic planning for the future. Now this account has become the central element of his plan. He began transferring large amounts from his main account, carefully disguising the transactions so that they would not arouse suspicion. The next day, Richard went to the bank to discuss the terms of the loan. He was well dressed and confident as always. His voice sounded firm as he explained to the loan manager that he wanted to take out a large loan secured by a house and a car. Your house is worth more than $2 million, the manager noticed, looking through the documents. This gives you great credit potential. Do you need approval for only $1.5 million? Richard smiled the way he did at work, making good deals. Yes, that will be enough. The money will be used for reconstruction. In fact, he knew it was a lie. But the manager didn't ask any questions. After a couple of hours, all the documents were signed, and the money began to flow into his offshore account. After returning home, Richard packed Mary Ann's remaining belongings into several suitcases and put them in the garage. He put her abandoned jewelry and valuables in a safe. He had a clear course of action in his head. He will wait until the loans are approved, and then make sure that all these obligations fall on her. The next day, he went to a car dealership, where he registered Mary Ann's car as collateral for a new loan. Her BMW, although bought with cash, was valued at a large sum. You will need to sign some documents to complete the process, the manager said, looking at the papers. Richard leaned closer, studying the papers carefully. Will you need her signature? Of course, sir. Without this, a deal is impossible. Richard smiled. He knew how to get Mary Ann to do it. That evening he called her. Mary Ann, we need to sign some documents to settle the formalities with the bank. His voice was calm, almost friendly. Documents? What is it? She asked warily. Yes, I'm refinancing the house to cover our common expenses. It's in your best interest too. We can meet tomorrow at your sister Nancy's place. She's a notary public. Mary Ann, surprised by his calmness, agreed. She still hoped that Richard would change his attitude towards her. The next day at Nancy's house, Mary Ann signed the documents without even looking at them. Her sister, delighted to see them, chatted about minor things, distracting attention. Richard was silent, his face remained calm. That's it? Mary Ann asked after she finished signing the papers. That's it, Richard replied, taking the documents. He knew that these signatures were the final nail in her financial coffin. A week later, the money from the loan was transferred to offshore accounts. Richard closed their joint accounts and blocked their credit cards. He called the wedding agency, canceling the upcoming service fee for his daughter Jessica. Who's going to pay now? The agent asked. Let Jessica go to her mother, he replied, hanging up the phone. Richard went to the lawyer's office to discuss the next steps. He wanted the divorce to go through with minimal losses for him. Did your wife sign all the documents? The lawyer asked, looking through the papers. Signed it, Richard replied. His voice sounded calm, but inside he felt like he was getting closer to his goal. Then you can be sure that after the divorce she will be responsible for these loans, concluded the lawyer. Your financial independence is protected. Richard nodded, feeling the burden of responsibility ease a little. He knew that there would be many more battles ahead, but for this moment he was ready. Mary Ann was sitting on a shabby sofa in a small studio apartment on the outskirts of the city. Her hair was carelessly tied up in a bun, and in her hands she clutched a letter from the bank. The words, "foreclosure notice," screamed from the headline as if mocking her. When she first saw these words, it seemed to her that it was a mistake. But now, after months of trying unsuccessfully to figure it out, she realized that this was her new reality. The house she loved so much was no longer hers. The new owner took it under the hammer, and Mary Ann was left with nothing. Her BMW, which she considered her symbol of success, was seized a few weeks ago for non-payment on a loan she didn't even know about. She was looking at the letter, her hands were shaking, but the tears had long since dried up. There was no time to cry anymore. I had to think about how to survive. David Johnson, who was once a confident and influential man, was now sitting in his old car, waiting for another delivery call. His life also collapsed as rapidly as his status. After his divorce from his wife, who found out about everything, he was kicked out of the house. She filed for a division of property and took almost everything, leaving him only an old car and a lot of debts. His career in an advertising agency ended as soon as the management found out about the scandal. The company could not afford to have a negative impact on its reputation. He was trying to get a new job, but in a small town, rumors spread quickly. No one wanted to mess with a man who had lost everything because of his weakness. David started the engine and headed for the next customer. The car rattled, its old engine barely able to handle the load. He looked at his hands gripping the steering wheel and remembered the days when he signed major contracts and closed deals with handshakes. Now his reality was delivering pizzas and grocery packages. Jessica, the daughter of Mary Ann and Richard, stood at the window of her new apartment, which she shared with her mother. She watched the rain trickle down the glass, her thoughts as gloomy as the weather. Her life has also changed beyond recognition. After her father refused to finance her wedding, and Jonathan found out about her support for her mother and David, their engagement was broken off. Jonathan, a restrained and well-mannered young man, could not accept that Jessica was justifying her mother's betrayal. Her words that, "it's just a part of life," sounded to him like a betrayal of their own values. He left without a fuss, but his last words still rang in her head. "I thought we were building something better." Now she lived with her mother in a tiny apartment, far from the luxurious future she and Jonathan had planned. Her phone was silent. Her friends stopped inviting her to meetings, and the engagement photos were erased from social media as if they had never existed. Mary Ann returned home late at night, after another shift at a local diner. Her legs were buzzing with fatigue, and her hands smelled of grease and detergent. She opened the door, trying not to make any noise, but Jessica was awake. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by textbooks and papers. "Are you still awake?" Mary Ann asked, trying to smile. "I'm working on a project," Jessica replied shortly. Her voice was indifferent, almost cold. Mary Ann knew that her daughter was mad at her. She understood that Jessica blamed her for the destruction of their family, but they both found themselves in this situation, and there was no one to blame but themselves. "I brought some food," Mary Ann said softly, putting a paper bag on the table. "It's not much, but it's enough for us." Jessica didn't answer. She continued to stare at her notes, ignoring her mother's attempt to strike up a conversation. Mary Ann sat down next to her, watching her concentrated face. "Jess, I know it's hard for you right now. But we can do it," she tried to say. Jessica raised her head, her eyes glistening with tears, but her voice remained firm. "Do you think you can fix this?" she said, pointing at the walls of their small apartment. "Do you think it's temporary?" "No, Mom, this is our life now." Mary Ann paused, not knowing what to say. She knew that her daughter was right. Their whole life has really changed, and there will be no going back to the old one. Meanwhile, Richard was sitting in his new home, enjoying the peace and quiet. Florida greeted him like an old friend, promising him peace and a fresh start. Richard sipped his coffee, sitting on the terrace of his small house, bought with cash. The house stood on the outskirts of a quiet coastal town, far from the hustle and bustle, where no one knew it. There were no neighbors staring at his life, no questions about the past. All that surrounded him now was silence, the ocean, and the smell of salt in the air. Richard went out to the beach, enjoying the warm sand under his feet. His new life wasn't perfect, but it was his own. He knew that he had left chaos behind, and now he was free of everything that had bound him before. He looked up at the horizon where the sun was starting to set. For him, it was a symbol of a new beginning, and he was ready for what the future would bring. And that's where today's story ends. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and comment. We'd love to discuss this story with you. See you in the next video.